Hey everyone, welcome to the Agronomists. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. Great to see everybody commenting. I think we've got the comments working this time, which is pretty exciting. And it is the first edition of official spring. I know meteorological spring started March 1st, but this is real spring. Okay, Peter? And yes, I see Peter Johnson is in the comments. Just quickly, before we get going with tonight's show, I already know what's going to come up next week, and it's going to be a discussion on wheat and on assessing wheat stands. And Peter Wheat Pete Johnson is going to be here, as well as Russ Barker, because we're going to talk about looking at wheat from the sky as well. So just a quick hint of what's to come for next week. All right, so great to see everyone. Just a quick reminder, of course, that you can qualify for CEU credits for joining us tonight. Head on over to realagriculture.com/agronomists tomorrow, and you should be able to get that all signed up. Tonight, we do, of course, have our show sponsor, like we always do. So special thanks to Adama Canada, to Real Ag Radio, and to Mind Your Farm Business. While other sources of innovation run dry, Adama is here to deliver, leveraging the world's largest library of actives to provide innovative crop protection solutions to your greatest challenges. We're all in on you. Talk to your Adama sales rep today or visit adama.com. And joining me tonight, this is super exciting. And as I joked just before we came on here, both of our guests, it's their first time on the Agronomist that they know of. So I'll bring in Aaron Stevanus with Mosaic Co. and Jim McComb with Farmer's Edge AgriCoaching. Welcome here. Now, Jim, you, of course, have watched the show. We've seen you in the comments. Always great to have had you on. But Aaron, you have been on the show just in clips.
I'm okay with that. It's
Well,
totally
I'm
fine.
glad.
I did
Very
enjoy
glad.
the fact that when you told me that this isn't my first time, so it's great to
No,
be back.
you're right. It should be. Yes. All right. Now, Aaron, where are you based?
I'm based in Elmira, Ontario, and actually soon to be Bloomingdale, Ontario. We're moving to our farm in June, so
Right.
that's exciting.
That is super exciting. All right. And Jim, how are things in your neck of the woods? Where are you based?
Yeah, so I'm based out of just north of Belleville, about half an hour north of Belleville. Got into some wheat scouting this morning, and things are looking great. It does feel like spring out there.
Okay, and so all of our friends watching from Western Canada, we apologize. Just kidding. They are warming up as well. Of course, they've got in Manitoba at least they've got some water runoff issues. Looks like it's going to be a wet one for at least a little while, and then of course as you go west, it just dries out. So my colleague Kara Oosterhouse shared the map today for Alberta. It is what was the year? I don't know if Jay saw it. It was like, one in, I don't know, driest in 86 years or something like that. That was listed for some of the areas. So pretty dry out that way. But I will say we did some driving around on Sunday, definitely seeing some of those winter wheat fields poking through. So for anyone who loves soybeans, I'm sure you're very sad about that because but there will be plenty of soybeans that go in the ground this year. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about feeding those beans and all those good things, especially all those micronutrients, but also phosphorus and potash, of course. So let's maybe start with, where do you start? So Aaron, I'll go with you first. When we're talking about soybean nutrition, where do you start? What's your start point?
Oh, great question. So, start point for me is always a soil test. So, whatever, especially now with fertility, the price of fertility, it's so important to make sure you know what's in your soil. So you are applying the right nutrient. So obviously you're taking your number one nutrient that you're deficient in. And then from there, actually, sorry, I take that back. I apologize. I need to quote my friend Dave Curry, who says your first dime should be spent on lime if your pH is low.
Oh my. Okay, but you don't know your pH if you don't do a soil test.
That's
But
exactly right.
also, I do like rhyme, so a dime on lime. Jim, do you agree? Do you start with pH? Do you start with soil test?
Yeah, pH is really important. We got to do the soil testing. It's the low hanging fruit, and we can see it variable in the field. So sometimes those areas that are eroded soil can pop up low pH, and we need to deal with that. And my favorite nutrient is the free or almost free nutrient that we get if we manage it properly and do some inoculating on the soybeans, and that's nitrogen.
Almost free, but not
Almost
quite.
free.
But
Yeah.
almost free. Okay, now, so a treat for the audience. I do, of course, have clips that I may or may not get to, but Aaron and Jim both have submitted some slides. Because we've talked about pH, I do want to, if we can, Aaron, what slide is your pH slide?
Oh yeah,
Because
absolutely. pH.
I
Slide
want,
number 5.
yeah, slide number 5. Jay, producer Jay, can you bring up slide number 5? Because I want to talk a little bit about why pH matters just so darn much. Goodness. Okay, so let's start with where we're at, and then how it leads to nutrient availability for sure.
Absolutely. So I can quick kick it off. So yeah, that slide is from TFI, so the Fertilizer Institute, and they do every 5 years. They do a soil test summary. So soil tests that are submitted that our labs choose to submit, they do a summary over 5 years, and so you can see across Canada, in general, our pHs are higher. You get to the more western part of Canada, Alberta, Saskatchewan, then we're in the sixes. In Quebec in the sixes, and definitely on the East Coast, even high fives and low sixes. But it's interesting in Ontario because we have so many different geographies and so many different forming factors for our soils that we can have really low pHs and high pHs within a 100-mile radius of each other. So pH is a major factor in our nutrition because of how nutrition works within the soil. And I don't know if you want to comment as well.
Jim,
Yeah,
do you want to
that's
comment?
like we got to watch the pH over time too, and consider what time of year we're taking that pH and soil test. But over time, over the 20 years I've been soil testing, I can see clients' pH going down. So they maybe started with a 7.9 and they're creeping towards that 7.2. And some of the ones that were neutral are getting a little acidic, and we just catch them up with that dime of lime or whatever you were talking about. It sounds like a good drink.
I was going to say what happened
Hey,
in Nova Scotia, but anyway, apparently Nova Scotia doesn't matter. Okay, so next is it the next slide that shows the availability. I can't speak tonight. Sorry, everybody. Jay, if we can go to the next one.
number 6.
Yeah, there we go.
You bet.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was going to
Look at
comment on
that.
that. Yeah, so I mean, when you look at that, I mean, pH is a huge factor, and obviously you're usually, I mean, in mineral soils, we're looking at that, 6.5 to 7 is our optimum availability for pH. When you get into muck soils, then you got to be down in that 6.5. So because it's a different material altogether, but really we got to strive for that 6.5 to 7. That's the best place for all of our nutrient availability, and just has to do with how our soil essentially work, and also cations versus anions in the soil. But we maybe get into that a little bit later.
Yeah,
So
and that
okay.
magnesium. Oh,
No, go ahead, Jim, and then I've got a question about this one, but go ahead.
Just take note of where manganese lies in that slide. We're going to talk about that a little later, I think, but it's really important for how soybeans nodulate.
Okay, so yeah, so that's pause. So that was one of the things I wanted to refer to. But also, as we get into some of these micros, they tend to hang out in a bit of a different zone. So as far as the ideal, so is this part of why we can run into some of these issues with these micronutrient deficiencies?
Yeah, for
Aaron, you
sure.
want? Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
Go ahead.
that's gonna drive some issues, and when we look at that, it's gonna maybe determine how we approach solving those issues. Go ahead, Aaron. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I agree. And well, a big part of it too is sometimes the charges on them, and also because they're needed in such small amounts. They're not like a macronutrient like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, or a secondary macro like sulfur and calcium and magnesium. because we need them in such little amounts, we can go from, deficient to sufficient to toxic very quickly. So we need to be mindful of that as well. But some of them do also tie up readily and are more available. So, for example, boron, let's say, is a negatively charged anion. So it can have the possibility to leach in its available form, but when it's tied to calcium, then it can bind in the soil and doesn't have any movement. So some of these can interact differently in the soil based on their charge and also how they work in the soil as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we got a good question from Peter that's come in that I want to talk about before we're going to go to our first clip because it is about manganese. And so there's some neat stuff in there that we'll touch on. But Peter says, if I'm farming in the dry areas of Western Canada, it takes more than a dime of lime. Now, Western Canada is quite blessed with not necessarily having a ton of pH issues, but it is completely a misunderstanding for many to assume there's no pH issues because there absolutely certainly are pockets where that can be an issue. But what else can a grower do if lime is not affordable? Or maybe let's just assume what are other things we can do with our soil other than liming that can help to buffer that pH?
That is a great question.
Jim, what do you got? Somebody say manure. Does it help? I don't know, but I just feel like it's like Windex. You put it on everything. Anyway.
Sometimes we can trick the soybeans into thinking they're in a little better position with pH. We can't fix all the nutrient problems, but supplying some manganese foliar can sometimes trick the soybeans into thinking they're in good shape for nodulating, get that signaling happening. I see Scott Gillespie commented he had some research way back when we were roommates, just after we were roommates in Guelph, on manganese deficiency induced by corn row syndrome.
Right. And it says here we saw it alleviated where anhydrous ammonia was banned in the previous corn crop. So this is what's interesting too, is that some of the things that we're talking about we can actually correct for in crop. Whereas, I mean, pH we're trying to correct for ahead of the crop, but there are some options in crop for some of these things, but not all. And one of the things, so I'm going to go to the clip with Dale Cowan here in just a sec, because then I want to dig into, Jim, you've hit on it a few times about that nodulating. So this is one of the things, of course, that we depend on those nodules just so much to supply that crop later in the season that we need to make sure that we're getting it right early on. But first, we're going to go to a clip. This is Dale Cowan, and we're looking at manganese deficiency in soybeans.
Hey, on Soybean School, we often talk about nutrient management, feed, and soybeans. And one of those micronutrients, one of your favorite, manganese.
Manganese, yeah.
And this year we've seen a lot of manganese deficiency.
Right.
Talk about what you've seen.
Well, it's pretty widespread this year, and that's a lot to do with the growing conditions, a lot of extremes in soil temperature and soil moisture. We are just naturally low in manganese, so any kind of additional stresses tends to accentuate the problem.
Yeah. Hey, talk about how you can identify it and that impact.
Sure. Well, in soybeans, it's kind of easy. It's always occurs in the new growth at the top of the plant because it's not mobile in the plant, so you always find it in new growth. And you have very distinctive green veins, and then the rest of the leaf blade kind of yellows out, gets pale green, and sometimes it can almost get white when it's really deficient.
Right.
So,
and you've got some of it right here.
yeah, some right here in the hand, so it's just quite easy to identify. And the impact is can be pretty severe on yield. So a lot of the field research we've done, a lot of side-by-side trials over the number of years, we're picking up between a 5 to 10 bushel response. And in some really severe cases, and one I can think of a couple of years ago, it was a difference between 22 bushels in the check and 48 bushels in the treatment. So it can be pretty significant to yield.
How do we manage it? Let's talk about in-crop first, foliar application.
Yeah, so the nature of manganese in the soil is it's highly reactive. We refer to these oxidation reduction reactions. So when soil is dry, lots of air in it, and manganese sitting on the surface of clays, it picks up that oxygen and becomes oxidized and unavailable to plants. So that's what really brings out the deficiencies of the dry weather. As soon as it rains, that removes the air from the soil. We go to a reduced state, we lose that oxygen, manganese becomes available, the crop greens up. And a lot of the giveaways this spring was we could see tire tracks through the fields. So where the implement had just pressed the soil down just a bit to get rid of the air, the manganese availability was better in the track than it was in the rest of the field. So all we got these green passes through the field, it could be even from the grain buggy from last year showing up, or from the drill or sprayer pass. So there's lots of clues out there this year that it is manganese.
What about, again, how do we manage it in field? Do we come in with a foliar application? Can we do it with one? Maybe do we have to come back a second time?
Well, the nature of it, when it's really severe, we try to manage the customer's expectation up front. So you may have to come in with 2 or more sprays because it's non-mobile in the plant. If it's really severe, a foliar feed is what you want. We want to avoid the soil contact, because if you put it on the soil, it's just going to get tied up again. So a foliar feeding, spraying on top of the plant is the best way to do it. Application rates, some of the liquid prepared products are putting on 1/4 pound. Some of the more soluble salts are putting on 3 pounds. It's up to the operator how you want to do it. But it's generally a foliar spray onto the tissue. And then maybe if it's really severe, another 14 days later when there's new growth coming out, it's going to be deficient again. You spray it the second time.
Back again.
I am so excited for green. Okay. It hasn't even been that bad of a winter, but I just am. It is mud season and I am so ready for green. Okay. So excellent point about manganese. We've heard this a few times, of course, that telltale sign where there is like compaction in the field, that's where you'll see where the deficiency isn't, and that can be that telltale sign. My question to the two of you, what is the toughest micronutrient deficiency to identify? I know it's a good one. I just wrote that one down.
I'd say, boron's really hard to identify. It's once it happens, it's a little too late. So we start blowing blossoms off and losing flowers and seeing 2 pods per bract. I know that boron's been a problem, so I should have been out there with boron earlier, maybe.
Okay. Aaron, what about you?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that one. That's a good call, because the other ones you can usually tell by if they're mobile or immobile or infantile chlorosis. But yeah, boron and soybeans especially. I agree with that one. That's a good one.
That's it.
Jim, I agree.
Okay. Okay, I like this agreement, but I'm gonna have to pick something for you guys to fight over. Okay, so let's back up a little though, in that we've touched on it slightly. Jim, I'll let you take the lead on this one. Nodulation, of course. What we love about soybeans is they will make their own N, but they've got to have those nodules to do it. So what nutrients, what conditions, what things do we need to know and do to make sure that soybean plant is going to make healthy and plenty of nodules?
It's so important to make sure that you got some resident rhizobium, or get it really well inoculated, or both. So my little demo here is a beer that Scott and I missed drinking back at Guelph, and it's kind of looking a little dusty, and it's likely been around for 20 years. Not really something you want to drink, and it's the same with your inoculant. You don't want to sit around. You don't want to sit in the heat or the sunlight in the cab of the truck, and use it the year you get it. And I don't always trust the inoculant that's bought on the seed. Put some peat or some liquid with that. Double your chances and win the lottery. Nitrogen's free if you let it happen on beans.
Okay. Aaron, you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's always a challenge. It's interesting when you listen to some of these high yield soybean guys talk about it, and they're talking about supplementing nitrogen just because of that huge yield increase or yield demand on nitrogen, because it is the biggest nutrient that soybeans need. But it's interesting when you look at some of the work that Horst has done here in Ontario, where he is applying nitrogen and ammonium sulfate, and it's like no response. So it definitely, I agree that as long as you get good nodulation, you're going to give yourself enough nitrogen. Now, interestingly enough, I think I've got a slide. We could go to slide 8, if you could please, Jay. So it's not always also, so obviously we need the inoculation portion to make sure that we have good rhizobia on the soybean root. But also, this is some work done by Dr. Ishmael Chekmek at the University of Sabanchi, and he talks about magnesium and how important magnesium is to actually help with nodulation. So in general, we usually think of magnesium as chlorophyll, to helping with chlorophyll, but which it does, it's a major part of that. But it also helps with the transport of sucrose in the phloem from the production of photosynthesis down to the root. So what he has here in the top, if you see on the graph there, there's leaves on the top and root on the bottom, and we have sucrose on the y-axis and magnesium on the x-axis. And as you can see, what he does, because it's all grown in a greenhouse, so he can change that concentration of magnesium in the solution. And what he does is as we have a lower magnesium level in solution, so what the roots are taking up, we have a higher concentration of sucrose in the leaf. So meaning we're getting built up. And actually, when you get a magnesium deficiency, you get purpling, which means that the sugar is staying in the leaf. But when your magnesium level goes up, then that sucrose moves down. And we get more into the root. As you can see in the bottom, the higher magnesium concentration, the more sucrose moving to the root. Obviously, in a symbiotic relationship, that rhizobia needs sucrose. They need that energy to provide the nitrogen. So if we have the right amount of magnesium nutrition, we're actually helping with nodulation and more nitrogen as well.
So you're not helping with this whole theory that soybeans like just scavenge and do their own thing. Like,
well, they do.
I feel like it's maybe more complicated. Okay, so Jim, now we've talked a bit about inoculating, making sure you've got the background rhizobia there. What nutrients early on really are so key to that early development? So we've got manganese for sure. Sorry, magnesium. And what about the other ones?
Yep. So we need a little phosphorus. There was a bit of fooling around with putting phosphorus in row with the seed, and it's just that having salting problems is a real issue with soybeans. So we have to watch that we don't over salt it. It's not recommended to put MAP with the seed at any level. So maybe a little liquid nutrient, but you want to be really careful. Dr. Dave Hume taught me that real early on, and it's good to observe. Then the next is I just love early boron, mid-season boron, late boron. I love boron. Just feed it spoonfuls at a time, and you can see those pods stack up the plant. See those multiple pods and hanging on the bract. And if we get it right, you get rewarded with those holiday pods too.
Okay, so hang on. Do you have shares in any company that's selling boron? I just need to know these things. No, I don't. But but there is a question actually: is do you see an ROI on foliar boron? Is that a thing?
Yes.
This is where I am like, what goes on foliar? I don't know. You got to tell me these things. So is there an ROI on foliar boron?
Boron's a fairly cheap nutrient, so we can get it from a retailer for about $4 an acre for each dose. And we might hit, we've played around with hitting soybeans multiple times, 3 or 4 and up to 8. I'm not sure that 8's the answer for everybody, and maybe a little soil applied just to make sure you're feeding it underneath. But we don't have to feed lots, just a little bit.
Okay.
Well, see, I'm gonna have to. There we go, Lyndsey. I'm gonna have to disagree on that one.
Fight! No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Well, and I part of it is because of where I disagree is that boron, because it's not a mobile nutrient in the plant, it's not partitioning up and down the phloem. So you can get maybe a buildup in that area, but really the best uptake of boron, in my opinion, is in the root and through the soil. So I know Dr. Ishmael Chekmek even talked about sometimes that foliar, like what you talked about, Jim, was like applying a lot. Well, he said a lot. Sometimes it can even wash off the leaf and then be taken up by the root if you're applying it a lot of the times. But I personally like it taken up through the root, because then you're getting an efficient amount taken up into the plant.
No, go
Where
ahead, Jim.
where we run into some problems is when it's too dry for the plant to take that boron up,
Right.
and it's not getting moved around. And we can, maybe timing is part of the answer, that we get it on in a dry season. We maybe want to get it on a timely manner to encourage that multiple potting.
Now, Janet asks, is there any advantage of using SAP analysis to detect early boron or micronutrient deficiency? SAP analysis. Look at this. I like this. Aaron, what do you think?
Oh, that's a good question. To tell you the truth, I actually don't have a lot of experience with that. I do know in blueberries, they will do like PDO like analysis. So I'm assuming that's the same as SAP. And they will do an analysis that way. Jim, do you have any experience?
Yes.
SAP
So
analysis?
when we do, I don't do SAP analysis, but we do tissue testing, and we'll pull tissue tests off the lower leaves and move up the plant. And like you said earlier, boron's not mobile within the plant, so we can pull a tissue off a lower leaf that has sufficient boron, but on up the plant we're deficient because it's not taking it up in a dry situation, or it's taking up everything that it could from the soil.
Okay. Now, Peter has a question. So this one's for you, Aaron. You support maize at up to 100 pounds per acre, correct? That feels like a bit of a throwdown, Pete. Easy there, Turbo. All right. So do you or don't you? This is like a lightning round.
I do. That is correct.
Okay.
And so I was going to say that was one of the things I was going to disagree with Jim on. We got past it was the in furrow with phosphorus. And yes, I do think 100 pounds of maize in furrow. We've done the work on it. Obviously, the biggest thing is row width and how dry your soil is. So that's where it's a hard thing. I agree with Jim 100% on it. We have to watch our salt, especially right in furrow with the seed. But if we do have, say, like 7-inch rows, 7.5-inch rows, or 15-inch rows where our row spacing is less, that concentration in the furrow is less. But still, number one is, what's the soil moisture? How dry is it? Because obviously, the drier it is, the more higher chance we have of burn, and that's where we really need to be cautious. But no, Peter. Yep, still stand behind 100 pounds of maize in furrow.
I just
There's
feel
gonna
like
be a follow-up.
Well, there probably is, but I also feel like just go to a drill and just do a sideband. I mean, why? This is fine. Just change all of your equipment and everything's fine. So simple solution. Yeah. Not quite, Lyndsey. Not quite. Okay. As I promised my two guests, there would be many conversations happening in the chat, and there are, and it's great because someone just told Peter he should stop eroding the knolls on his farm, and he wouldn't have to deal with those. So he's not even on the show and he's getting roasted. Okay. So there is a follow up. Aaron Stevanus, do you get a yield boost at 100 of maize? Am I enunciating the Z enough there? Versus 50 pounds. So 50 versus 100. Where is the economical rate here? Do we see a difference?
Yeah, it's a good question, Peter. And maize, Micro Essentials, as Z. There you go. There's the Z.
Thank you.
So I would say, once again, it comes back to your soil test. So phosphorus, you will get a response, but obviously on your lower testing soils, the response is definitely going to be higher. So I'd be really basing it either of two factors. So one, are your soil tests low and you're looking for a yield response? Or two, are you looking to build your phosphate levels and just do your replacement? Those are the two management factors I'd look at in a year like this. Depending where your cropping system is at and where you've priced crop and where you've say prepaid fertilizer at, I'd do it based on your crop removal. Other years, I'd say base it on, essentially, do you want to build a little bit off that crop removal? What's your yield gain? I mean, all soils are different. All fields are different. So a blanket approach to an application of a nutrient is not our best kick at the can. That's my opinion.
Jim, follow up?
Well, I agree. We have to get some phosphorus in there. I promote using echo bands where we try to plant soybeans beside some old fertilizer bands from the previous corn crop. and take advantage of what's left there, it can grab some phosphorus and potash that's kicking around in a concentrated band.
Which this year, every little bit helps. Okay, so before we move on from boron entirely, I do want to make sure that we talk about it in relation to potash, but potash in general. But we've also segued to the next clip so beautifully, I'm just going to go to it. So in talking about, knowing your fields, we're going to go, this is Aaron Breimer, who's been on the show before, talking with Bern Tobin about field maps and what we learned from some of these things. So Jay, if you could, clip number 2, and I will pat myself on the back.
I want to talk about fertility. Phosphorus, we have so many conversations about how we feed our soybeans and whether we feed them enough. When you talk to growers and you share the data that you work on and the management insights, what do you tell them about feeding soybeans? Are we feeding our soybeans enough?
So soybeans and fertility, that is a big question mark. Nobody really has the right answer. Every agronomist I've ever met will have an opinion, but it all comes back to what I call the limiting factor. And actually, it's not mine. It goes all the way back to some late 1800s. We call it Liebig's Law of the Minimum. Most people will know it as the barrel stave. You have staves at different heights, and the staves are supposed to represent different nutrients. And the water it pours out whichever stave is the lowest. The question is, which stave is the lowest for soybeans? Here's the problem. Nobody really knows. When you talk to an agronomist, they're going to have based it on their experience. The challenge is, in my opinion, every field is unique. And if you try to blanket treatment all of your soybean fields, you're going to run into problems. You're not going to be able to maximize your yield. You need to understand what is the limiting factor for every part of that field and how different fields interact differently.
So Aaron, you've got some interesting research here. Take us through it that really shows how variability in fields can impact soybean yield.
So yeah, what we did was we took very intensive soil test data and we overlaid the yield data. And what we were looking for was to see how soybeans responded to different phosphorus levels. It would be great if we'd found that perfect curve that every field matched. Here's 3 fields, all from the same grower, all planted roughly the same time, all the same variety, and we have 3 very different responses. The first one is what I would call your typical response that we would expect to see, that as phosphorus levels go up, yields go up until you get to a point where the phosphorus is a little too high, and maybe that's bringing on some diseases and the yields start to drop off. And then you've got a field that I would describe as maybe a little bit heavier, a little less drainage, maybe there's a little bit more compaction, and as the phosphorus keeps going up, so do the yields. And then you got these other ones that are the exact opposite, where the highest yields almost seem to come from the lowest phosphorus levels. So you got 3 very different examples, all in the same year, same grower, everything's the same, but you got different responses. This just goes to show that every field is unique.
Dun, 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 dun. And for anyone who wants to see the rest of that, you can head on over to realagriculture.com because I clipped off the end of it. But if anyone did actually watch the whole thing, you'd note that there were other nutrients that were causing some issues there. So that's the key to understanding how all these things work together. Okay, and so on that note, let's talk, we were talking a bit about boron, let's talk boron, and of course, the one we haven't talked about a lot yet, potash. So Jim, do you want to take it away first with the boron potash discussion?
Yeah, so they kind of run hand in hand. If we're short on potash, that's the big fish, and boron's kind of the secondary fish. But it's real hard to make magic happen without some good potash levels or availability to those soybeans. And it's not always just dry potash sprinkled on top. It's got to be solubilized into the soil and available to the plant when it needs it. And that's in those dry situations.
Yeah, I'd agree with that Lyndsey. I mean, it's I guess we go to slide 10, please, Jay, and we did this is a little work done by I referenced Dr. Ishmael Chekmek fair amount tonight, but he's I'm a fanboy, I guess, of him. His work in general
Love it.
is awesome when it comes to just plant nutrition and how nutrients interact in the soil and with the plant. So this is once again a greenhouse grow that he did, and what he's looking at is different concentrations of boron and potassium in solution, and how boron affects the uptake of that potassium into the plant. So on this graph, time is the x-axis, and that potassium concentration in solution, because it's grown hydroponically, so they can change the potassium solution and the boron in solution that the plant's growing in. And specifically, this is canola, but can still be referred to in soybeans as well. And that yellow line at the top shows when we don't have enough boron in the solution. So the uptake into the plant, so meaning potassium moving out of that concentration in the moisture in the water. It goes down, but it's more linear. It doesn't go direct, like it's straight, like it's flat lines. That's what I'm looking for. Jeez, can't talk tonight.
You got it.
Flat line. So you can see that potassium's going into the plant, but not near as much as it could, say, on the line below, the green line, where we have an adequate supply of boron. And so we get a dramatic uptake of potassium into the plant because of having adequate boron nutrition. And so there you can see that they work kind of hand in hand together by essentially making that potassium more efficient. And really kind of, some of the theory that goes behind that would be, so we know that boron is a major part of cell integrity. And so when you look at kind of at that molecular level, where we have essentially our membrane on the outside of the root, and we have essentially this process called hydrogen ion ATP phase. So essentially putting hydrogen ions out just on the outside of the root, so it's acidic. So we essentially can take some of those more cations off of the root. Off of the soil colloid. Having that essentially acidification in that area, then we can mine off some more potassium, and the soil level. But it also is helping, obviously move more potassium into the plant, and it's just a cool little correlation. Jim, do you have any comment on that as well?
Yeah, that's great information. It's been a long time since I've heard it, but I've been told that when you apply boron, you can see the roots grow just a few hours after you apply it. So it's residing in that root tip and exuding some sugars out there and making things, moving sugars to make things grow. So.
Pretty key. Now, switching gears a little bit, John asked a good question, and John, you will be forgiven for being late. John usually welcomes everyone to the show, but I suspect he was napping. Anyway, late to the party, but has anyone asked how to manage nutrient program with perhaps some of these nutrients in short supply or even unavailable? So that, of course, has been the theme of this winter and this spring, is possible shortages of some things. And realistically, I don't know that there's much we can do about, sort of what will be, but how, as agronomists advising your clients, how do you sort of game plan for uncertainty in the growing season for sure? Aaron, I'll start with you.
Sure, of course, absolutely. And so, I mean, I think the biggest thing is controlling your controllables. There's some things that that are going on in the world right now that we just cannot control. And we just need to be that's just the way it is. But the one thing we can control is in my opinion, your relationship with your retailer and coming up with that plan. Let's work through your plan. If you prepaid fertilizer, make sure you have it, which you probably should be able to if you prepaid it, and just work through what is going to be applicable. And if there are things that are in short notice, then just plan around that. And for soybeans in general, I think that's not going to be an issue. I think we're going to have, in my opinion, we should have enough fertility for soybeans this coming spring. Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, we sometimes tiptoe around the retailer and grab some nutrients from alternate sources like manure, and we use quite a few pelleted biosolids, and it's hard to get potash though with those lots of potash with those instruments, but we try, and there's always if we have to go a little lean on a nutrient, maybe we can do some foliar feeding. We can't feed that plant completely a potash diet through its leaf, but we can help it push some roots early on so it can search its own. And that comes down to, if we get out of the nutrient talk and talk about planting properly, right depth and consistently, and the right time, don't do compaction, the plant can search some for itself.
Good point about the compaction for sure, and taking care of your soil and setting it up for success for sure. I mean, there's the big time agronomic questions, and if you can do that first pass as best as possible, at least you're setting it up for as much success as possible. Now, Jarrett brings up a really good point when we're talking about efficiency, of course, with our fertilizers. How much could, air quotes, you drop fertilizer rates with banding with a planter versus broadcasting? So I don't know if we want to talk phosphorus or potash or both, but what would be the recommendation there if, let's say, you could make that call? Who wants to go first?
Myself,
Okay.
I love banding
ahead.
fertilizer. I think the days of broadcasting phosphorus are dwindling, and getting it in a band is just going to get it so much more efficient. We can drop it back to 30 pounds below crop removal and trick that plant into thinking there's more phosphorus there than what there really is by having a concentrated band. It's not a perfect scenario. I'd love to get into vegetable ground where we have, 40, 50 parts per million. Phosphorus is a lot of fun, but we all don't have that luxury.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I agree. Banding is like, that's the most efficient way to do it, and I agree. I mean, Jim said it all well, so I can't say much more. The only thing I'd say be cautious on is the potassium. If you are banding, we got to be cautious on, are we banding in obviously not strip till for soybeans, but in furrow or 2x2, and in general when we talk soybeans, we're usually talking in furrow. So the only thing I would add to what Jim said is just stay away from any potassium product in furrow, obviously, because once again of that salt issue.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Now, and certainly, I mean, realistically, there's only so much we can change now. There's, what happened last year. There's what fall conditions were. There's what, what happened. There's only so much we can do now and in season. I think, Aaron, I mean, good advice for sure. This isn't the season to be trying to build any of your fertility levels, unless of course you've got oodles of manure or biosolids that you can get your hands on. But we know that, especially manure, that's a long-term game as well. Great stuff, but it's not going to provide all that much this year. So planning is going to be the name of the game. Now, Warren Schneckenberger says, beans with a planter with dry fertilizer, what would be your ideal blend for soybeans? So what do you think, Aaron? Now, of course, we can preface all of this with "it depends," but imagine that the "it depends" is thrown out the window. But yeah, what's a good rule of thumb, at least, or what to consider with your blend going dry fert with a planter?
Yep, great question, Warren. I personally, what I use on our own farm is a blend with Micro Essentials and KMAG. Obviously, I'm biased, so I will preface that right there. But
That's fine. You can do that.
I do like 100 pounds of Micro Essentials because we get 40 pounds of phosphorus, 10 pounds of sulfur, and that 1 pound of zinc. And then with the KMAG, depending on where the mag levels are in the soil, I'll be 50 pounds, sometimes 100, but usually I'll stick to 50 because that little bit of KMAG goes a long way. I'd mentioned the magnesium side and why I think it's important for nodulation, but then also bumps up a little bit more sulfur as well. Because just in general, I think not just soybeans, they're maybe not as responsive as say wheat and corn, but I think we need to keep sulfur in our rotation as well because we just we just have less of it in the soil. It keeps on depleting.
Mm-hmm. Jim, your thoughts?
Yeah, I love KMAG to get some solubilized potash and some magnesium source that we don't often get. And going over some fertilizer prices today, KMAG's likely a decent value this year compared to the other potash source. So yeah, all for KMAG. Maybe some, we have played with side dressing soybeans a little bit with a liquid, but we just got to get something that's very available that year and ready to go for the soybeans.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so John has a follow-up, which he usually does, and I appreciate. It shows he's listening and also can clarify things. So John, I like it. So let me ask the question in a different way. So John was saying, okay, what if I can get some stuff? So here's how we go. If my soil test says I need X, Y, and Z, but my retailer says, hey John, nice try, but you're getting this amount of X, Y, and Z. So I think I see where he's coming from, is that essentially if how do you make the call? Like, if you know you're not going to be applying to what the soil recommendation is, what else can you do? Do you shortchange certain fields and max out on all of them? Do you try and spread it out across all your fields? What's the strategy? And honestly, guys, I don't know that there's a right answer on this one, but this is, I think, the reality for many farmers this year.
John, if you can, if you're a no-tiller and you can go back to those old bands from corn, that's a cheating way of getting some. And then we might have to, the quarter of the first nutrient and a third of the other nutrient, we can get away with it. We're not in a build situation this year, that's for sure. And if we can band and get the plant to look at that band and take advantage of the concentrated nutrients and the availability of concentrating a nutrient in a band, that's the best case scenario. At those rates, I wouldn't be real excited about broadcasting that situation.
Okay, Aaron, how would you tackle this?
Yeah, it's a good point. I like that kind of what Jim said there about making sure that's broadcasting is probably not going to be your most efficient way to look at your nutrition if you're short of it. So yeah, any way you could get it closer to the root, and in a band or in a 2x2 or any way possible, that's going to be better. I mean, it's going to be something that we're going to have to work through. I mean, I guess I should I saw Peter chirp back at me. Can you guarantee there's going to be micro essentials as said for, like, I can't guarantee
Can you,
any.
Aaron?
Yeah, no.
There are no
Nobody
guarantees this
can.
season, everyone. No.
So,
I'm sorry.
I mean, there is no guarantee. Everybody's, it's going to be a challenge, and that's just in volatile situations. It's just what we're living in, and it's unfortunate. We're just, I guess, I agree with Jim. Do the best with what you can, and just be happy that we're able to grow a crop, and that we're able to work through good prices and deliver that to the elevator. Because there's some people right now that can't. So I know it's a challenge, but it could be worse, I guess.
I will add, if ever there has been a year to soil test, this, like, spring soil test, like, get on out there. If you haven't tested that field in a couple years, like, this is the year to do it. I'm pretty proud of the Ontario growers that I know. I think that Ontario probably has a decent soil test rate. Anyone in the comments can tell me I'm wrong. I know that in speaking with a lot of agronomists one-on-one, soil testing is probably one of the things as an industry we could probably improve on greatly. And so, I mean, if you know you've got a field with some decent background P and K, it might be the year that you shift some things around a little, based on what you can buy and what you can put in the ground. But I mean, absolutely, we're going to have to just do the best with what we've got. And anyone with long history of manure is probably going to come out a-okay. Also, I would like to point out that Peter is being mean to me in the comments, and so if anyone would like to fork out any sort of chirps for Pete, now is your chance. Anyway, apparently there always is a right answer. I just don't have it. But yeah, right. That's what I said. That is just mean. Anyway,
I can't say, Lyndsey, I can feel it because I'm always wrong. When it comes to Pete, I'm always
Oh,
wrong. So
yeah.
you're in good
See,
company.
see, good. We'll have our own club, and Pete's not invited. We're gonna grow soybeans and corn. Okay. So now, John does mention he is not a no-tiller, so he does not have bands that he can go over. John would like to tell you stories of the ruts he has in his fields and often has, and that he deals with, and that we know, of course, is going to be one of those things that we're going to be dealing with this spring for sure. Okay, so IDC and soybeans from a micronutrient standpoint. So this is an interesting one. We know, of course, that there's a couple factors that go into this. Anything we can do to prevent it from a micronutrient standpoint on the IDC? Jim, Aaron, any thoughts? Maybe, maybe not. Are we going to
I don't
throw
know.
somebody's? Are we going to throw varieties under the bus here? What are we doing? Maybe don't. Okay. As I said, we're agnostic here. We love
Yeah,
everybody.
I don't know.
I don't know. That's a stump.
That's it. I
Stump?
have got nothing. So Peter, if you've got some research you could link to, have we covered this in a soybean school? I don't think we have. Maybe add that to the list. That's definitely something we're gonna have to do. Okay. So, oh, you know what we haven't done that I do want to do? Jay, can you bring up, I think it's Jim's first slide? Because I always find these things fascinating, is to understand the different plant functions and to understand which nutrients drive each of them. And we've touched on several tonight, but I think this is yeah, the iron chlorosis. Okay, so that is a good point. It's quite common in Manitoba. It happens a lot. And so I do wonder producer Jay has put from IDC to IDK. I don't know. Anyway, it is really common in Manitoba. So what is happening there? What is different about Manitoba? I don't know. It's got better pH. Maybe that has something to do with it. Anyway, I found this slide though really kind of neat because I love to figure out or to learn about all the different things that these different micros do. And that it, of course, gives you that little tip of the hat of trying to identify nutrient deficiencies. So I guess that's one of my questions is when you're asked to go scout a field or you've got a grower that calls you and says, I don't know what's going on. Walk me through your process of trying to identify some of these deficiencies as far as trying to troubleshoot some of that.
Yeah, so plants all speak similar languages. They maybe have different dialects, but when there's boron deficiency, I think is that mobile in the plant, and that's a no for boron. So I know I can look at the bottom of the plant and look at the top of the plant, or pull tissue tests from each and decide whether I have differences. Potash, we know it'll peel right out of the bottom leaves on corn. Well, it does the same in soybeans. So we see it starting to peel the potash out, and you see that necrosis happening. It knowing that mobility in the plant gives an easy diagnosis to what's going on. I want to point out the copper one too. The odd time you'll see low copper levels in soybeans, and I haven't played with copper in beans. I don't think that's a real necessity, but you really want to watch. Copper is phytotoxic in soybeans. So once the sun shines on the leaf and it has copper sitting on the leaf, it can really burn. So just note of caution.
Mm-hmm. So Jason Vogt has weighed in here, as has Ray Dobenko, which I think really key to note. Yes, that Manitoba, higher pHs for sure, high carbonates, and that there seems to be higher salts equal more IDC issues. So I'm not sure. Do we not have, I know that we have lots of salt problems out west. I don't know about if they're all that common in Ontario. I don't know.
I think
Are
that's
they?
where we have to play. We have to play the ignorance card. Where that's a stupid
That's
Eastern Canada people. But I do know,
we're
like,
just
to the
blessed.
point. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
But we do have more iron in our soil. When you think of the charge of iron, it does have it's a believe it's a 3+. So when you think of that, how it's bound to the soil, and we need essentially more acidic soil to more. It needs to be. We need a more acidic area to more hydrogen ions to pull it off of the soil
Oh,
colloid,
awesome.
because
Yeah.
it of that more positive charge. It's more bound to the soil.
Mhm.
So maybe pH plays a factor in that. I know it is harder to get out of the soil, but when you're lower in iron in general, which it is in western part of Canada, then that is, that's a factor. That's a little bit I know. I'm not gonna lie.
Hey, I
I play
this
complete
is
ignorance.
we're all learning together, Aaron. We're all
I
learning together. Yeah.
I
So
learned
it's
about it
okay.
out there in Manitoba when we went to a Hutterite farm, and they talked about throwing nails in underneath the trees when they planted them because
Mhm.
they die otherwise from iron deficiency. Pretty neat stuff
Yeah.
for an Ontario person.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a completely different soil. I mean, the soils are so different. The soil maps are so fascinating to look at. As I have shared with my Western friends, but the soil map. So I live on 100 acres, not that big, maybe 60 acres or fields. And when we did our environmental farm plan and I got the soil maps, it looked like one of my kids had finger painted and just like smeared a whole bunch of colors together. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? Because I'm used to, Western Canada where it's like you can draw the soil map in like 3 big rings and away you go, you're done. Like bing bang boom. No, it's not that simple. But it is so much more uniform. They are relatively young soils. There are just completely different challenges in Western Canada. So there you go. Okay, we are running out of time. Although Jason does chime in and say that there is iron, there's plenty of iron in the soils, but saturated soil conditions and other factors keep the iron from the soybean. So it's definitely an availability issue. So see, we're all learning together, everyone. It is fantastic, even though apparently I'm always wrong. Whatever, Pete. Peter Johnson's on the show next week. Just you wait, you guys. Anyway, okay, so to this is a really interesting one I'm going to throw out there before we wrap up the show. So Brian says, so we've talked about Liebig's law of the minimum. What about Wallace's law of the maximum? So can you or will you see a response using micros if you haven't got the macros correct? Aaron, your thoughts?
I mean, it is kind of, it's like Liebig. That's a great question. To me, that's like almost Liebig's law in reverse.
Right.
So if you see, okay, so you get your macro. If you, I gotta reread that question. Apologize.
No, I know. I'm reading it too. I've never heard of Wallace's law of the maximum. I know
I
some
haven't
Wallaces.
either.
I don't think that they're the ones that made the law. I'll be honest. So, I mean, they're great people, but I'm pretty sure that's not who did it. But yes. Jim,
It,
any
Well,
thoughts? Do
I
we know about this? Someone Google it.
yeah, sure. Like we've run across soils that are super low in phosphorus, like in the 5 and 6 range, and you go, boy, that couldn't produce a crop. There's no way. We start supplying nutrients, foliar, and just nursing that crop along early on. You can have so much influence early in the crop's life when it's pushing roots and growing as a baby, that you can sometimes overcome some of those macronutrient problems. It's not easy though, and you have to really take care of those smaller nutrients that might be limiting. And the pH is the big fish. The pH is the big fish.
well, I kind of got my head wrapped around that question a bit. That's it's a great one, Brian. And so I would still go back to, okay, so can you see a response to micros if your macros aren't dialed in properly? Well, there's a reason why they're macronutrients versus a micronutrient. So we use a lot of macronutrients. So the fact that they're out of whack, and it would depend, I guess the question is how far they're out of whack. But if those macros are not in proper balance, then you can apply all the micronutrients you want. You're still going to
Mhm.
be minimal. Your minimal nutrient is still going to be that macronutrient because it's not up to where it needs to be for sufficient crop nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I hope, Brian, that answers your question. Hat tip to Jason Vogt. It is true. We don't have a Western agronomist on. We try very hard to have an Eastern and West every week, but I promise you over the next couple weeks, we're a little Eastern focused just because we've got a couple things that are in the immediacy because we'll be in the field so much sooner here in Ontario. Not to rub it in, just saying it's at least 2 weeks earlier. But the Western issues will get their day just a little into April. So also it's a great reminder, and Jason has done this before and I appreciate it. If you've got any topic ideas or people you'd love to see on the show, I am always open to suggestions. I love getting your emails, your feedback, your comments, and it's really great when you volunteer your colleagues for this. People love it. They love getting the call of like, do you want to be live? It'll be so much fun. So by all means, recommend topics and people. We do appreciate that for sure. And yes, Jason probably is volunteering because he loves being on the show and we love having him. All right. So Aaron Stevanus, Jim McComb, thank you for sharing the stage with me tonight. It's been a lot of fun and we all got to learn something and I got 2 clips in. So yay me. Okay. All right. Thanks to the 2 of you. Reminder to everybody, of course, you can head on over to realagriculture.com/agronomists to get your CEU credits. Next week, Pete Johnson will be on the show to talk about what do you do with your winter wheat? What does it look like? How do you assess it? And I will have a mute button. And Russ Barker is going to join us as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And so thanks to Aaron Stevanus. Thanks to Jim McComb. We'll see you next week, everybody. Bye now.